direction on that matter so that we can move according to proper counsel. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eileen and just let you provide us advice on budget process for the Clean Water Consortium.
Well, happy to tell you what I know, and we can talk about recommendations going forward. The fact of the matter is that this consortium is in kind of a gray area where budgets are concerned. My initial thought was that you would be following Oregon's local budget law. And in reviewing the budget law provisions, what it says is that intergovernmental agencies are punted out of the regular budget law, and you're referred to a separate section in the budget law statutes, which apply to councils of government. But if you look at the definition of councils of government, the requirement to meet that definition is you have to the entity has to be providing services directly to individuals, and you're not doing that. You're a consortium of government bodies who are working on a joint cause, but you're not providing services directly to individuals. So in talking with Kevin Ince at the county, he and I conferred on this, and he had an opinion from the Internal Revenue Service that concurred that given the charge of the consortium, you do not qualify as a council of governments. Ergo, that provision of the local budget law does not apply to you either. So the end result being that it isn't clear at all that you have any statutory requirement to do a budgeting process. And I couldn't find one, and Kevin couldn't either. What I recommended when I helped draft the fiscal services or fiscal agent agreement, and I don't know where you guys are in that, but it was we proposed in that, or I proposed in that you substantially follow the procedures that apply to councils of government, so that you have some kind of budgeting process that you're following. You don't have to do that, but my recommendation, as I'm sure all of you know, if you work for public entities, is you should have some kind of transparency with respect to the funds that you are accruing and spending. But it's going to be kind of a matter of policy, I think, for this board to decide what budgeting procedures would you like to follow. I think you should have some, but we don't have much in the way of statutory guidance in terms of what that's supposed to look like.
Thoughts, everybody? Lisa, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad that you've come to the same conclusion we have on another intergovernmental agreement that we've been talking about the same issue with. And Kevin, I think there's language from the Department of Revenue. If you have IRS documentation, you might want to send it, at least send it on to us so that we can make sure that the other ones that we're working on that are similar will have that in the file as well. But I agree that we need a budget process. I just don't think we need to go through the process that local governments typically go through, which is putting together your budget committee and having a meeting, and then there's advertising times, specific advertising times in local budget law in between those meetings for review, approval, adoption, and then filings that would go on to the county assessor and county clerk, which obviously this group doesn't need to do either. So I guess I would recommend that we prepare a budget. We ask our advisory board to be budget members because they're going to be with us hand in hand through this whole journey, and have a meeting or two to conclude a budget.
Kevin, what was your comment there you wanted?
Hi, yeah, I just had one clarification to Eileen's comments. The guidance that I received was actually from Oregon Department of Revenue, not the IRS. And
Okay.
those Matt, I forwarded that communication string back to you again if you wanted to share it.
Okay.
Kelly?
Yeah, I I just have one question, which was the services to individuals. How do we navigate that where it's kind of another gray area? Are we providing services to individuals? We may be doing that.
Well, I'm not, my thought is, legal counsel would tell us that. Between Kevin and legal counsel, I think they've studied it. That's my thought.
I think services would be, to individuals would be the city providing water and having a water bill to individuals. I think of that as a service. If we are paying for infrastructure that goes to another public agency to provide that service, we're not providing service to individuals, but I get where you're going, Kelly. It's those onesie twosies that we haven't really even talked about yet on what solutions might be. And Eileen, it could be that we provide a $10,000 improvement to someone's water system at their home, or we're researching their well and we're researching their septic system. I mean, there's going to be things that that this group could facilitate the funding for, but we wouldn't be providing those services directly. That's my opinion.
Tamara, what's your take on it?
So that's the legal piece, I guess, is a stipend, if you will, for example, providing a service to an, and I'd appreciate Kevin and Eileen's thought about that. And if so, I can see, I don't want us to head down one course and then have to regroup and say, oh, because now we are providing some direct service or support. I'm not sure in the budget law statute, not at all familiar with those, what that means in this context.
Sorry, I'm printing it out so that I can have it handy and
Okay.
I'll give it a sort of a informed, educated guess, but I have to tell you that we're in kind of a gray area. I interpret the statute that refers to councils of governments and defines councils of governments as if you're providing services directly to individuals, then you are required to follow the procedures in the local budget statutes. I would interpret that to mean what is the primary mission of the organization, and I would be comfortable saying that if you have incidental help to individuals as part of your overall mission, like funding, I think you would probably be able to defend, not strictly following the local budget law. That isn't the overall intention of this consortium. You're in sort of more of a 30,000-foot planning and it isn't providing services as you would like a water district would, and billing people for water, which is my interpretation of what the requirement is. With that said, if you guys are very much going to be in the public eye, I know this is a big deal in your community. I wouldn't rely on just that definition to avoid any public budget process, but that's why my recommendation was do some kind of substantial compliance, so that if anybody comes back and says, what budgeting process are you using, you can show one. And if it isn't specific to the requirements in the local budget law, at least it's very similar to that, so that you're complying with the intent of the statute, even if you're not required to comply with the letter of it. And I know that's a bit of a mealy mouth lawyer answer, but that's ultimately, and Kevin may have come to a different conclusion than that, but that's my interpretation based on what input we've gotten so far.
Chair, if I can just interject there. Yeah, I completely agree with that, Eileen. The way that I characterize a consortium when I reached out to the Department of Revenue was that it may lead and fund project design and construction. However, it's not intended to maintain ownership or operate any of the projects once they're completed at this time. And then, so they interpreted that as specifically not meeting the definition of a council of governments under 294-900 because we don't provide, because the consortium doesn't provide services directly to individuals. So to the extent that, that remains true, that's applicable. But if I think that if the consortium ended up owning a project and providing service directly, I think that would change the nature of it. So I agree completely with what Eileen was saying.
Kevin, I have a question. Are you planning to set up a separate bank account, or is this going to be a segment in your budget?
So the funds, the cash, will be pooled with, all of the county's cash, and that's, custodial, cash that's custodial in nature, cash that is the county's, and because that's how we manage our cash. It's going to be set up on the books as a separate fiduciary agency fund. Because so a custodial fund is a type of a fiduciary fund where the funds don't belong to the county. They're not governmental funds, so to speak, so we're not required to include those in the county budget, but I'll be using the systems that we use for accounting to if one is adopted by the board, to set up and maintain that budget and ensure that there's a budgetary control there. So won't be included in the county's budget, and that's one of the benefits of the county acting as the fiscal agent, is we can leverage obviously the systems and whatnot that we have in place to completely segregate the funds on the books into its own separate fiduciary fund.
Okay,
Does that answer your question, Lisa?
it did. Yes, it did.
The one thing I'd like to, and I talked to Matt and Kevin about this too, is I don't want to see, and I'll put it bluntly, I don't want to see a fractured decision-making process on this. I do not want to see whatever it is, whatever entity in the county, whether it's BOC, staff, or anybody, where, well, this is our money and this is consortium money. I mean, we kind of have that now. And I think Kevin had talked about ways to combine those, because I don't want to see that happen. I could see trouble coming there if that thought came down the line. Whereas the county might apply for a grant or receive some funds somewhere. I don't want anybody to get any idea, because the purpose of those is to do the mission statement of the consortium, is what's in my mind, accomplish the goal, which is laid out pretty good. So, but I think we need some kind of, if it's connected anyway, and how we decide how we're going to budget. That's my thoughts on setting up some kind of budgeting. I think everybody should know the money, how we're spending it. I think that's very important, especially for our advisory group or anybody. They can come in and look at it and see what we're doing. So that's my thought.
And I think the forms that are provided, by Secretary of State's office for local budgets are good. They're simple. It's a revenue sheet with 3 years historical, 1 year anticipated, and then your budget moving forward. And so I think that's simple to use. And David, you're right. You already have funds that were going to be used for some of these purposes. And we were directing some of the SEP payment funds that are going through OHA will be coming back to this effort as well. So right now, I think we've talked about that going to Morrow County. And we've obviously looked for some congressionally directed spending dollars for this effort as well. That would be directed to Morrow County, but for the water consortium.
Yeah, and, following along with that, I don't know, Kevin might answer this, is there some way in the budget process that these funds that the county holds, that were awarded to them under a grant, because they need to fit together with the decision-making, in my mind, of the consortium. And so to get a complete picture, they need to see all the funds that are available to accomplish the goals that have been laid out in the consortium, mission statement, which is, does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. So any be so it's tough to show the connectedness, I think that you're referring to, because in the case where the county is a recipient of grant funding, specifically as it relates to water, drinking water projects, or activities, those would be recorded as revenues into a special revenue fund that we have dedicated for that purpose. That's our water planning fund. Um, and those dollars, excuse me, those dollars actually, those are governmental funds. So we're required to include and incorporate those into the county's budgeting process. That may just be it depends on what the circumstances and how you want that to work. But let's say hypothetically, the county is a recipient, according to the terms and conditions in the grant agreement, but it's intended to pass those funds or subaward, if you will, those funds to the consortium. Then on the county's budget, that would actually, in the water planning fund, that would be a single line under special payments for a subaward grant made to the water consortium. And that side of it would have to be budgeted for and included in the county's overall budget.
Well, Kevin, what would the mechanics of doing what you just say be? Would the consortium say, if they looked at the whole picture, all the assets that are, all the funds that are available to accomplish the mission, and part of those funds are in the county, under the county's name, and they were wanting to use, or they should be using those funds, would they request to the BOC to make that transfer, or just request the BOC to make that expenditure? What would the mechanics of spending money that is technically the county's money on a consortium project?
So to ensure everything's covered and accounted for, my suggestion in that case, and I guess Eileen, tell me if you think this is overkill, but I would think that there would be a request made from the consortium to the County Board of Commissioners, and ideally there would be some form of a subaward agreement or agreement in place that dictates what the transfer of those funds look like. And the reason I say that is because depending on the source of grant funding, so let's talk about like congressionally directed spending. We're talking about federal dollars, and the requirements will vary depending on the agency involved with making that original grant to the county. But when it comes to subaward of federal grant dollars, the subaward contracting requirements are extensive and very specific. So in those cases, you actually would be required to have a contract in place to the entity that's receiving the subrecipient, which in this case,
Under the current BOC, I don't see I don't see problems, because they all know the mission statement and were around when this was formed. But this is a long-term project to get this taken care of in Guam, and maybe Tamara or Lisa, who you're really more familiar with grants and so forth. Is there a problem? Is it harder to get grants for the consortium than it is? I don't want to, I'd hate to lose a nice grant specifically for doing the mission statement of the consortium because the grant giver or whoever doesn't want to give it to the consortium and rather to give it to the county. I'd hate to lose that funding, but also you don't know what the temperament of the next BOC is going to be, is my thought. Maybe they go, well, that's our money. We want to spend it down here or over here or blah, 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 blah. What do you think?
Well, when you apply for those dollars, it's for a specific project. So I don't think the concern would be that Morrow County commissioners would choose to go do something else with the money because you still have to, you have to get a drawdowns from the feds and do reporting back quarterly. So, I think it's just a matter of Morrow County is responsible for that funding source and the requirements of that funding source. So if we just in our budget, when we're making our budget, we have a revenue section and the revenue says Morrow County, federal appropriation from whatever and $900,000 or 1.5 million or whatever it is and document it and not worry. I don't think we should worry that Morrow County's not going to pay that money or do the paperwork to complete the federal requirements to get that money. I think we have to trust our partners that we're all going to work together to get this done.
Yeah, and as long as everybody has their eye on the same ball, I feel the same way. And so, but like I said, you and Tamara are pretty familiar with Oregon grants. You've got a lot of them and you understand that process. So I just wanted to know.
And the Oregon grants are easier. They've got less requirements than the federal ones do for
Okay.
follow-up.
Chair, if I could just make a comment to that. A good example would be the current EPA grant that we have. That was the result of the first congressionally directed spending request. The project budget for that grant was included a subaward for I think it's around $124,000. Tamara, correct me if I'm wrong, to Umatilla County. So we're bound by the provisions in that grant and that budget that was submitted. So we cannot use, we meaning the county, we cannot use that funding for anything other than that intended or stated purpose unless we went back and amended the project budget, and then that would even have to be approved then by the EPA. So if the county has applied for money and the intent when we applied for that was to subaward or grant a portion of that funding to the consortium, that's going to be reflected in the application and ultimately in the terms and conditions of the associated grant agreement, and we're legally bound by that. So I think there's, like Lisa said, just to echo, I think there's little, I would have little concern of a future board of commissioners going rogue, so to speak, and saying that's our money, because regardless of what they say, it's under the discretion of the granting agency.
Oh, what are we looking at here as far as Matt? Are we looking for a motion to spell out a budgeting process or a consensus of, do we want an abbreviated one? I mean, I agree with, I think the others here, I think Kelly and them, we need a budget and we need the board and the advisors to be able to look at that budget and make their decision-making processes as they go along through the fiscal year. But do we have to go full bore with all the, notification and, the full budgeting process that Eileen's been talking about too. So is that the decision we're shooting for here?
That's what I'm looking for direction on, is just, an agreement by the board that we do not have to go through the Council of Governments form of government or budgeting rules that require a budget committee. More or less, the board itself would be the budget committee. We would still present a budget, post the budget, and then just have a hearing with the 4 board members for approval and adoption.
Okay. Eileen or Kevin, do you have a suggested motion that just to make sure that we're covered for the future, if people want to know about our budgeting process, that the board is doing it the way they're supposed to, that we might take a vote on today? To codify, so to speak, what Matt just, well, and to just go by, and then take a vote on it and make sure or at least we got a consensus from the board here that that's what we want. Is there a motion that, just to make sure we're covered?
Sure.
What we move forward with, our process that we move forward with.
Can I ask a question as well? I know that the last task that I did for your board was to draft a fiscal agent agreement, and Kevin and I went back and forth a little on it. And last I heard, it was being referred to the board for some policy discussions. Is it fair to say that has not been adopted yet, or was it?
It has been adopted, yes.
It has been adopted. Okay, and I haven't seen the final version, so correct me if I'm wrong. But what that agreement says is that the consortium will adopt an annual budget in substantial compliance with the budgeting procedures for councils of government as described in ORS 29490 through 294.925, and timely providing a copy of the adopted budget to the county. So I think it would be a simple enough thing to have the decision of this board be consistent with the agreement, assuming that that text is still in the one you adopted. I think the motion would be to go forward with a budgeting process that is in substantial compliance with those statutes. And then they think that the procedural aspects of that would have to be ironed out by Matt and Kevin and whomever else would be carrying out the actual mechanics of the budget process. What's the board's comfort level on just agreeing to it in principle and then deciding from there how it's going to be carried out?
I think that's why this came up at our last meeting, Eileen, is because we had a question about whether we really needed to follow in substantial form the local budget law and refer to a statute and send a budget on to the county, because that process isn't required of us.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think that's why we brought it up at the last meeting.
Yeah. And Eileen, that the fiscal agent was adopted with amended language to strike that, unfortunately, that sentence. So instead of adopting an annual budget in substantial compliance with budget procedures of council of governments in ORS 294.9 and timely provide a copy of it, more or less it just says adopting an annual budget and timely providing a copy of the adopted budget to county. That's how it was adopted.
Okay, so you just left it up to, thus the conversation today about what is that going to look like, right?
Yes.
Yes.
This is Kelly. Hey, I don't know, what's the point of arguing about what's substantial compliance and what the difference is between substantial compliance and just compliance? Is that 2 meetings and a couple notices? It just seems like we're arguing over spilt milk when it doesn't seem like doing full compliance really is that much more work than substantial compliance.
We don't have to comply at all is the point that I'm trying to make, is we can have a budget, but we don't have to comply with local budget law per ORS, whatever it is. I mean,
I think it also lays out the rules for future boards on the consortium. We're kind of setting precedent here. That's my thought too. You know, I wasn't at the last meeting. Did we appoint a budget officer? Isn't that what we usually do, like Matt, or isn't that how it usually goes? On a municipality, you have a budget officer. Do we need that? I don't know. Maybe we don't need that.
Well, technically, no, because that is a requirement for the local budget law procedures. But if we assume that those do not apply, it's still, I think it would be a good idea to have someone who's responsible for maybe drafting a budget and proposing it to the board for you guys to discuss openly. With that level of transparency, I think would be helpful. And who that person would be, I guess, would be a call for the board to make.
Well, I think it'd be Matt would be the
Yeah,
yeah.
in the bylaws I sent out, it has that under the managing director to prepare annual budgets. It doesn't specify a public or budget officer, but designates that the managing director has that responsibility.
Yeah, Tamara, what do you got there?
Yeah, thank you. My comfort level would be to, rather than making some general motion, I'd like to vote on something that is written and that I see, so that we've had a lot of conversation today. And I would just like something really brief about here's the budget process for the CWC. And I think someone was going to ask you, Eileen, for a memo, and maybe we don't need that, but just a little something written that says that we can vote on, that says, according to ORS, the CWC is not required to specifically comply, but they will follow something in substantial conformance, and it looks like this. So that I feel like I spent a lot of my life, my work life, explaining nuances of things that aren't explicit. And we have a lot of work to do, and I don't want to spend a bunch of time talking about our budget procedure. So is that a lot of work to ask like Eileen or Kevin or Matt to spell something out? And generally, I think that's fine. If we don't have to comply with a more rigorous process, I'm okay with that. But I err on the side of being more transparent rather than less. And if it means a public notice and a couple of meetings, I'm okay with that. I think this committee has a lot of work to do to build the public's trust, and I don't want any sort of shortcut to circumvent that.
except this is a public process, Tamara, and we do notice our meetings and we will have a budget. I mean, we're going to do all of those
We do,
things,
but what would you,
but
I get it, Lisa, but what would you vote on today? Like a summary that somebody just orally said? I mean, what would we vote on today?
I like the idea of having something written down to vote on, but I think that we could sit down and have a budget meeting and talk about the components to go in the budget. If Matt and Kevin want to meet separately to do that, that's great. We just need to make sure that we have plenty of revenue opportunities in there that will cover projects that we'd like to proceed with.
Well, let me ask this. Does Kevin and Matt feel that they have consensus from the board to move forward, and then at the next budget meeting have a motion ready first thing? Matt, Kevin, do you guys feel
I don't know about I didn't feel consensus, so I'm hearing a couple of different perspectives. As the fiscal agent, I think it's, the county will support whatever reasonable process the board wants to decide on for the development and adoption of an annual budget. In this role, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, dictating what that process should be, and Matt's role is different. So I guess I would defer to him, but I think that's an important, process and control that the consortium board needs to come to an agreement on and outline and then adopt that, whether it's, through a policy or in the bylaws. And then as the fiscal agent, we'll happily do whatever we need to do to support that.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we're headed. And that would be done if we had a budget committee meeting, and that'd be the very first thing I think you would vote on. But we need to get a consensus so someone can can draft or come up with a motion that expresses a consensus that we arrive at today to move the ball forward. That's my thought.
From based on what I'm hearing, maybe I can offer a suggestion. What it sounds like, if and first of all, to your point, Tamara, I'm happy to provide any kind of written opinion that that the board would like in terms of what we've already discussed, which is the extent to which the law applies or doesn't to you guys. That if I could be happy to provide that. That the budgeting process itself, as Kevin alluded to, is kind of within the board's discretion, in my opinion. But in terms of basic, what I think would probably be sufficient if we want to define substantial compliance would be a proposal whereby the board authorizes itself to have a meeting to discuss the budget, at least one. It would be a publicly advertised meeting that you would have the conversation in public, develop a proposed budget based on what you anticipate your needs to be, and then have a public hearing, invite the public to come and review it, comment on it. You don't have to do what the public says, but in terms of transparency, a hearing is a simple enough thing to hold. It's not that much different from just a regular meeting, or you could have it during your regular meeting. So that this is the budget we propose. Y'all come and comment on it. We're being transparent. And then from there, in terms of implementing the budget, then the board just has to decide. It sounds like it's already Matt's job to propose a budget, work with the board to refine it. And ultimately, you're going to end up with a final document that you would then share with Kevin, so he knows what the money looks like. I don't think you would need to do anything more than that. So my thought would be to maybe we need to have a confab with the staff to propose a process, but I don't think it would have to be much more complicated than that. The board is going to have a meeting, maybe two, to discuss the budget. At one of those meetings, you're going to have a public hearing on the draft budget that you're looking at. And then it's going to be voted on and finally adopted, and that you're going to skip all of the resolutions and hearing process and all that other stuff that you would ordinarily follow under the budget law, but you could truncate it substantially and just hit the highlights. And I think that would be a very simple thing to draft. I mean, I can propose that in writing too, if it helps.
If we're looking at a very simple process, just stating how we're going to do this so we're transparent. I mean, whether we have that as a standalone document or if we just incorporate it into the bylaws, if it's going to be streamlined, that's something we could do. You could look at the bylaws that have been presented. We can get that other additional language out, and then have an adoption of the bylaws at a next meeting, giving you a weekend to review that language.
I think
That works for me, as long as I'm voting on something that I see and that I've been able to read and that other people have been able to read. So,
yeah, I like
That sounds great.
So, okay.
So if that's the case, I mean, Chair, I would recommend, if we could just have a motion to proceed without a budget committee consisting of a residential budget committee membership, and allow Eileen and I to work that up with some discussion and have that ready for bylaws for adoption at a meeting in a week or two. That'd be great.
Okay.
I guess I would ask that we just invite our advisory board to sit in on that meeting in lieu of a budget committee.
I would like that too.
Good idea.
I think the advisory committee is gonna be a real asset to us if we use them correctly.
Let them be
Real
a part of
asset.
that process.
Valerie,
This is this is
Yeah.
Kelly again. And I'm still gonna say that I would just as soon, knowing the politics in Morrow County, that we comply completely with the Oregon budget law. I just think that it just looks better. And I'm going to vote accordingly to that. I just think it's not that much more process that we'd have to go through to do it correctly and openly and transparently. And this is going to stand for a long time. You know, might be 30 years down the road, and the people that follow us, you know, we don't know who's following us. We trust ourselves, but I think the public needs to trust us. And Tamara said it best: is this consortium needs the public's trust.
well, myself, I think we are hitting those things. We're following the Oregon law, and we are going to be transparent. So, Valerie, were you able to craft a motion out of that?
I've got a motion to proceed without a budget committee consisting of residential budget committee membership and allow Eileen Eakins and Matt to work that up with some discussion and present with bylaws for adoption in a week or two.
At a future meeting.
Yes.
Can I ask a question? What's the residential committee?
So on your standard budget committee requirements is to have an equal number of residents who live within the taxing district, be represented on a budget committee. And so we would have the 4 of you on the committee as well as 4 residents. And then we would coordinate a meeting to have them. We would need a majority to make a decision. We have to notice that. That's a specific budget committee that's held. Have to give 2 weeks notice with that. Then we have that hearing or that meeting, and then we schedule a budget hearing, which the board then could vote on the adopted budget or the proposed budget to make it adopted.
And I would just ask that we replace the residential budget committee with our advisory committee.
Would they be voting on that?
Why not?
Well, ultimately, the role of the budget committee, sorry to interrupt, but I'm to Lisa's point, that's what it sounds like would make sense is if you're going to dispel with when we're talking about substantial compliance, I'm imagining ordinarily, as Matt said, you would recruit budget committee members from the public. But if you have an existing group of advisory members and have them be your, what you're going to end up with is a budget committee, I'm imagining, of your board plus those advisory members, and they're going to be the budget committee. And ultimately, those people kind of work out a proposed budget. But ultimately, the approval of the budget itself falls to the board to decide. So the advisory committee would be providing input, but ultimately the board, without those people, is going to be tasked with the responsibility of approving the final budget. So if the concern is, will they vote on it? They might vote on a proposed budget. They might, the group might vote on something to propose to the overall board. That's the way a regular budget committee works anyway. But ultimately, the vote to approve the budget is going to fall to the board, notwithstanding whatever the advisory committee vote was initially. I'm not articulating that very clearly, but I would think that it sounds like you have sort of a ready-made group of citizens who are your advisory members who could sit in lieu of a residential budget committee. And I could see, and with something Matt and I could talk about is decide that this will be our budget committee, the board plus our advisory members. How many of them are there?
There's more members than the board, but
There's
as
11 members.
so as
Okay.
long as the board is the one that ultimately is approving the budget, I say we use our advisory board as part of that process. Gives them a lot more knowledge. They'll understand where dollars are coming from, where dollars are going. And we need them to help be outreach in our community. So I think that's, I mean, we've handpicked that board for that purpose.
I agree with her completely. They're gonna be outreach. They're gonna have transparency. They're gonna
They'll
have,
be advocates.
they'll be advocates. Yeah, I agree with her statement very, very strongly.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it's there might be periods of time where they're not as active. And if we just ask them to get together once a year and work with a budget, again, not to beat a dead horse, but just as long as it is spelled out and explicit for us to understand, internal understand, and then what the expectations and the requirements are of the budget committee that we will decide upon as either part of our bylaws or as a standalone matter. And it sounds to me like there's just a fine line between what we're talking about and full compliance with the budget committee. So a very fine line. I'm okay with that, although I also fully hear what Kelly is saying. So Kevin, you're going to be managing it. So
Actually, he won't. It'll be me.
Be Matt.
it'll be you. Okay, got it. That's right. I keep forgetting. All right.
So essentially what I think I've heard described is kind of how Eileen stated it. So that's essentially the process that's outlined in the budget process for a Council of Governments, with the exception of the composition of the budget committee, which in this case would be the advisory board. Just to add a little bit of clarification, the major, where that Council of Governments budget process substantially deviates from the local budget process is after budget adoption. There's essentially there's no rule or law that the budget has to be followed. There's no formal budget adjustment process for a Council of Governments. You adopt it. It's a control to the extent that the board makes it, empowers it, I guess, to be a control and to be enforced. But the big difference is after the fact, if there needs to be changes. Other than that, really, I think what's been described, like I said, is the budget process for the Council of Governments, with the exception of the composition of the budget committee.
Which is more generous. If you want to
Yeah.
look at numbers is generous, which helps our effort at outreach and advocacy and all the things that Lisa just mentioned. So it's a plus. So, Mr. Budget Officer, what do we need?
From this, a motion, just a motion to have a budget process that includes the advisory committee as budget member or committee members. And we'll I'll incorporate that in a bylaws write up and have that to you for a meeting in a week or so. If we want to designate a specific date, we can just put that in there.
Do I hear a motion for that?
I'll make that motion.
I have a second. I'll second it. We moved in second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Kelly.
Okay, motion carried. Okay, so then the bylaws are still yet to be finalized, correct, Matt?
Yes, and we would, if we're going to incorporate the budget process to it, I do not have a final copy for consideration at this time. Um, um, and I need to get that pulled together with Eileen in that way. I can share just really quickly the language on advisory board. As you see this screen with the Word document here. So the advisory board, it is 11 members. These advisory board members will consist of one industry representative, one representative from the city boardman, one from the city of Oregon, 4 from unincorporated areas around the city of Boardman, and 4 from unincorporated areas around the city of Oregon. I need to, with Eileen, figure out a way to change the advisory board members will provide non-binding strategic advice to the board. I don't know if that's that works with the idea of considering them as part of the budget process, where they do become a voting member for it, though the board does not, it definitely is not binding because the board can adjust the budget from there. If Eileen and I can work on that this next week and get a meeting set for you, I think we're fairly close. If you'd like to read through these, that section plus the managing director, those are the major changes from what was included in the draft bylaws with the IGA, and we can consider and get this taken care of. Probably not next week, but the week after, and get that taken care of.
Sounds good. Let us know when you want the next meeting.
I have a question.
Tamara.
Yeah, am I on mute? I can't now see.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, I do have a couple of questions about the bylaws. Is now a good time, or do you want to wait till the next meeting?
I'm open to taking it. Chair, how would you like to proceed?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
Okay, so on the first page, under officers, under 1.6.2, the board may elect a vice chair from its membership. Whenever the chairperson is unable to perform the functions of the office, the vice chair person or chair will act as chair. If both the chair and vice chair are absent from a consortium meeting, the members present will select one member to perform the chair functions. We wouldn't have a quorum if the chair and vice chair are gone.
No, we need to strike that.
So which also makes me wonder if under membership, 1.2, and I'm sorry if I didn't bring this up earlier. So we have 4, which is an even number, and most boards and committees have an odd number. And we could address that if we had a 5th person, and maybe that 5th person is a voting member. And I know it goes back to the IGA, but maybe this committee votes on a 5th person who's at large. That might be one way to fix it. And if we don't want to do that, then we do need to change the language at 1.6.2. Because if both the chair and vice chair are absent, obviously we don't have a quorum. Any thoughts about that? It's a small, nice, small group, and we don't want to get too big, but almost every other committee board I'm on, it's an odd number rather than an even number.
The issue that we have on this is I believe the IGA outlines the 4-member, so we couldn't change the bylaws to change the membership in my understanding.
Unless we amended the IGA. And I know Matt and everybody spent a bunch of time working on that. I again, I don't need to repeat myself, but if that's what it takes, it looks like it's fairly simple to do that. And it also relates to my second point under section 1 is the terms of office. I wonder if we should give some consideration to rotating terms. Otherwise, all 4 of us will go on and off. We could at the same time, and that leaves Matt and Eileen with a brand new board. And given the structure where the 2 governing bodies make the appointment of both an appointed and an elected staff person, it might not be as much of a concern as it would otherwise. Is that an issue or a concern for anybody?
I would probably strike that each member will serve a term of 1 year. Because you're right, if we keep switching board members every year, it will be difficult to have continuity. But with that being said, our port commission in January of each year, they select their board members for each of those appointments. So, I mean, they could choose to keep the same person for 3 years and switch another one out every year. So that's hard to say. But I personally, I wouldn't think that we would want to have a meeting if only 3 of the 4 members could make it. We just need to arrange our meetings so that we can all be present.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about having a 5th person, just so we have an odd number?
You know, it's something that we talked about when the IGA was presented, and we approved it then. I would say unless we have a problem with tie votes, that it doesn't matter. If we get to a point where we have tie votes, obviously we've got a problem.
Tie vote means it dies under Robert's rules anyway.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to express that we don't have to make a decision today. Maybe Matt can think about it and come up with it. The next piece under section 1, the correspondence, comma, add, then I think should be a period. That's not super clear to me, except what I think the intent is that board members and staff shall not act on behalf of the board except for formal action that has been approved by the board. Is that the intent of that paragraph, Matt? And of course, we can't legally as individuals commit ourselves to the consortium without a consensus vote. I'm just thinking it might be, and I'm sort of a pain in the rear with verbiage, but just to clean that up so that board members and staff shall limit their actions to those specific issues that have been reviewed and approved by the entire board. Is that the intent? Or did I make it mean something different? And I'm not sure what advocacy.
Why don't you mull over that language and shoot something to me as we.
I will. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry to kind of bring this up. I could have done it ahead of time, but I read it early this morning after a late night. So those are my concerns. Otherwise, I think it looks like a good document.
Okay. All right. We can work on that to incorporate some of those little changes, get the budget designation in there. And get you a clean copy a little more advanced to review and provide additional feedback if necessary. if any of the board members see any other items that they have questions, concerns, or would like to have altered language, please forward that to me in the meantime, and we can get that incorporated. With that, Chair, I would just ask us to set a date for the next meeting so I have a target to work towards.
I guess Eileen and Matt, how long will it take you to get something put together for us?
Eileen?
Well, I'm in the spirit of cooperation. I would like to have maybe at least a week would be reasonable given our respective workloads. I don't think it'll take all that long, but at least a week would be good. 2 would probably be plenty. But I don't know what else you have going on. I can certainly squeeze you in, Matt, for that conversation.
How's Thursday, the 8th looking for everybody?
I'm out of the office the 8th and 9th.
We have BOC
I-
on the 7th, so.
Yeah. It sounded sort of like Eileen was shooting for maybe 2 weeks, so maybe early of the week of the 12th.
Okay. What day are you looking at, Tamara?
The 12th or the 13th?
Well, I'm open either day, all day on both ones, so. Kelly, what do you look like? What day looks for you?
I'm okay, the 12th through the 13th.
12th or the 13th, either one?
Mhm, mhm.
Okay,
The 12th, I have a legislative meeting that I'll be zooming in on. I would be available after 3. The 13th,
Sure.
I am available in the afternoon.
okay.
Those both
The-
work.
And the 12th, I have a standing meeting at 3 o'clock to 3:45.
Okay, does everybody like 2 o'clock? Or you want to go for, okay, 2 o'clock on the 13th?
Sure,
Okay.
you betcha.
Is
Does
Valerie?
that work better for you, Eileen and Matt? Okay,
That'll give us just a little bit of time to work together. So
yeah.
get this
I'll get your
finesse-
stuff over. Yeah, I'll get those funny little tiny comments over to you, Matt, either later today or first thing in the morning.
Thank you.
Nice work though, everybody. Yeah.
Right, sounds good then, we'll set it for that, so. Okay, next up would be public comment, Griffin, you got anything to say? You're the only public here.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, just checking,
I appreciate it.
okay. Any other business for the group? Okay, and we'll call it adjourned. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
See ya,
Bye.
thanks Valerie.